Right now, you have 47 apps on your phone. A streaming service with 10,000 things to watch. A podcast for every topic that has ever existed. And somehow, you still get bored. So here's a question nobody thinks to ask. What did ancient humans do when they were bored? Not medieval humans, not ancient Romans, not even ancient Egyptians. We're going back further than that. 100,000 years. 200,000 years. Back when there was no writing, no art, no music, no language as we know it. The answer changes everything we think we know about creativity, religion, and why your brain works the way it does. But first, did boredom even exist back then? This is actually a serious scientific debate. For a long time, researchers assumed our earliest ancestors were too busy surviving to get bored. Every waking hour was hunting, foraging, building shelter. There was no downtime. But that assumption turned out to be wrong.
He had spent years studying the Kungsan people of the Kalahari Desert. One of the last groups on.
They worked on average about 15 to 20 hours per week. That's it. Not per day, per week. The rest of the time, they rested, they talked, they sat, they did nothing in particular. Solons called them the original affluent society. Not because they had stuff, because they had time. More free time than most modern humans ever get. So the question isn't whether ancient humans got bored.
The question is, what happened when they did? Let's start with the obvious one. They played. This sounds simple. It isn't.
Years. In 2010, archaeologist Francesco Derrico and his team studied a collection of shells found at a site in South Africa. They had holes drilled through them, and they were coated in red ochre. These weren't tools, they weren't weapons, they weren't food, and they were beads. Someone had sat down 75,000 years ago with nothing better to do and made themselves jewelry. And it started with boredom. But here's what's really interesting. Making those beads would have taken hours. Maybe days. Drilling through a shell with a stone tool, without electricity, without metal, without patience built by a lifetime of entertainment. That is a long afternoon. And they did it anyway. Because the alternative was staring at the wall of a cave. Necessity didn't invent art. Boredom did. The same pattern shows up in music. In 2008, researchers excavating a cave in southern Germany found a flute. It was 40,000 years old. Someone 40,000 years ago, before agriculture, not because they had to, because they had a free afternoon and a bird bone. And it turns out music is what the brain does when it has nothing else to process. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, who studies the origins of music, argues that musical ability is older than language. Our brains were wired because rhythm is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition kept us alive. But boredom didn't just invent art and music. It invented something far more powerful. It invented imagination. Think about this. You cannot be bored without a concept of time. To be bored, you have to know that this moment is lasting too long. That something else could be happening. That the future exists, and it could be better than right now. Boredom is, in a very real sense, animals don't get bored the way humans do. A dog waiting for its owner isn't bored. It's just waiting. It doesn't have a concept of what else it could be doing. But a human sitting in a cave 100,000 years ago, staring at the fire, nothing to do, starts to think. What if the hunt goes wrong tomorrow? What if that sound outside is a predator? What's beyond that mountain? Where do we go when we die? Every question religion has ever asked. Every question philosophy has ever asked. Every question science is still trying to answer. All of them started the same way. Someone was bored, and their mind started wandering. Psychologist Sandy Mann published, she had people perform the most boring task she could devise, copying numbers from a phone book. And then tested their creativity immediately afterward. The bored group dramatically outperformed everyone else, because boredom forces the brain to generate its own stimulation. And the brain, when left to its own devices, is extraordinary. But there's one more thing ancient humans did when they were bored. And it's the one that mattered most. They talked. Not about hunting, not about food, not about logistics. They told stories. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, the same researcher who discovered that human social groups naturally cap at around 150 people, spent years studying what humans talk about when they're not talking about anything important. His finding? Roughly 65% of all human conversation is social gossip. Who did what? Who said what? What happened to someone you both know? This sounds like a waste of time. It wasn't. Dunbar argues that language itself evolved not for practical communication, but for social bonding. Before language, primates bonded by grooming each other, physically. But grooming takes time. It's one-to-one. You can only groom one friend at a time. Language replaced grooming.
Now you could bond with 3 people at once. 10. A whole group around a fire. You could tell a story about someone who wasn't even there.
You could build trust with people you'd never touched. Language, and therefore human civilization, didn't emerge because we needed to coordinate hunts.
It emerged because we were sitting around with nothing to do, and we started talking about each other. Boredom invented gossip, and gossip invented society. So here's where we've ended up. 75,000 years ago, someone bored in a cave made a bead.
About death, about the sky, about why things are the way they are. And some of those questions became religion.
Some of them became science. Some of them became art. Some of them became you, lying awake at 2 a.m. with your phone on your chest, thinking about nothing in particular. Here's the part nobody talks about. Modern psychology has a term for what happens when you eliminate boredom completely. They call it cognitive overload. When every moment is stimulated, the brain never gets the chance to do what it was built to do in the quiet moments. Process, consolidate, create. The default mode network, the part of your brain that activates when you're doing nothing.
It only turns on when you're bored. We spent 300,000 years learning to fill silence with something meaningful. Then we invented the smartphone. And we've been filling silence ever since.
But every time you put the phone down and sit with nothing for a moment, every time your mind starts to wander and you let it, you're doing the same thing the person in the cave was doing.
The same thing that made the bead, the same thing that made the flute, the same thing that looked up at the stars and started asking why.
Boredom didn't hold ancient humans back. It's what made them human. And it might be doing the same thing for you, if you let it.